Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Atlanta City Council Post 1 Candidate Forum. My name is Ashley Bruner. I serve as policy advocate at the ACLU of Georgia. We at the ACLU of Georgia, as well as our partners, the League of Women Voters, Atlanta Fulton County, and the Georgia Association of Black Women Attorneys, encourage informed and active participation in government through education and advocacy. So we are so excited to share this candidate forum with you that will be moderated by Candace Presley, an award-winning journalist, a two-time Hall of Fame member, inducted in 2019 into the Georgia Association of Broadcasters, and in 2016 into the Georgia Radio Hall of Fame. As Director of Community Affairs at WSB-TV, Candace drives the Family to Family project and leads the station's community efforts across its broadcast platforms, including WSB-TV and the company's 4 radio stations. She's executive producer of People to People on WSB-TV and interviews community leaders weekly during the People to People one-on-one segment. Candace began her career in radio, first in Athens, while studying journalism and political science at the University of Georgia, and later at WGST, the Georgia News Network, WSB, KISS 104.1, and B98.5. So for more than 30 years, she's hosted the Sunday morning public affairs program, Perspectives, where she's interviewed hundreds of community and thought leaders. The University of Georgia Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication honored Candace with the John H. Drury Outstanding Young Alumna Award in 1992. In 2015, the Grady College named Candace to its Centennial Class of Journalism Fellows, which is the college's highest honor. She's been profiled by the History Makers, the world's largest African-American oral video history archive, for her significant contributions to media. Candace is a former president of both the National Association of Black Journalists and the Atlanta Association of Black Journalists. She was the chapter's 2012 Pioneer Black Journalist and is a graduate of Leadership Atlanta. Candace has a passion for the community and is strongly committed to the empowerment of women and girls. Her volunteer efforts include service on the boards of the Girl Scouts of Greater Atlanta, the Atlanta Community Food Bank, Crime Stoppers Atlanta, Project Healthy Grandparents, and Day One, the Alliance for Christian Media. Candace loves to travel and supports the arts, and we are so thankful, Candace, that you are here with us tonight.
Ashley, thank you very much for that generous introduction. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this forum where we will have an opportunity to hear from the candidates for the Atlanta City Council Post 1 at-large seat. It is my pleasure now to introduce each of the candidates that we will be hearing from this evening. We have the incumbent, Michael Julian Bond. Wave, Mr. Bond. Alfred Brooks, Brandon Corey Goldberg, Todd Gray, and Jeremy Sharp. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. This is the way our forum is going to proceed. We have questions for each of the candidates on a number of issues of concern to the community. At the conclusion of those questions, our viewers, whether they be on Facebook Live or any of the other streaming services where we are broadcasting right now, will submit questions, and we will put those questions also to you candidates. And before we begin, we want to give each candidate an opportunity to make a brief, that's at about 1 minute, opening statement, and then we will proceed with questions. And we will begin with Mr. Bond.
Well, first I want to thank you for having this forum tonight. Thank everyone who's in attendance virtually or on one of the other platforms. I'm Michael Julian Bond. I am the incumbent. I'm the Post 1 at large, representative of the Atlanta City Council. It has been an honor, privilege to serve you. I am a native Atlantan. I am a father of 3 grown adults whom I raised myself here in the city. We're all products of the Atlanta Public Schools. I have served diligently in this space. I believe in supporting public safety, economic development, building more affordable housing and workforce housing, economic development, and making sure that our taxpayers get a return on the taxes that they pay in the way of effective city services. I didn't want to go over, so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. Now, an opening statement from Mr. Brooks.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for coordinating this. I am a father, a husband, a homeowner, a small business owner, and a high school economics teacher, a graduate of the Andrew Young School of Public Policy at Georgia State University, and with your support, the next Atlanta City Councilman for Post 1 at large. My name is Alfred Shivy Brooks, and I'm here to serve and ready on day one. I stand on the front lines advocating for civil rights, working families, and have fought for social justice, an end to mass homelessness, an end to pervasive poverty, and the protection of voter rights in Atlanta. My platform is called CARES, which is an acronym. C for connectivity through a citywide broadband internet service that will be free or low cost to families. A for a more affordable Atlanta. R for a more responsive Atlanta, E for economic development and sustainability, and S for a safer Atlanta that leads with compassion and is aware of the needs of public safety and better community relations in today's time. I believe that together we can positively change the trajectory of Atlanta and how we do politics. I believe that now is the time that we need leadership that cares, and I look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. Now, Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you, everyone, for hosting this event. Thank you to everyone attending, and good evening to my opponents as well. My name is Brandon Corey Goldberg, and I am a candidate for Atlanta City Council, Post 1 at large. I've been involved in our community for many years in leadership positions. I'm the chair of the Mid-Fulton Democratic Party and serve on the State Party State Committee. I'm the immediate past president of the Stonewall Bar Association of Georgia. That's the LGBTQ Attorney Association. I've served on the steering committee of the Atlanta Black Jewish Coalition. My background is in bringing people from different perspectives, walks of life, and ideologies together to find solutions with broad buy-in, the sustainable solutions. The _1 issue facing Atlanta is division in our city. That's what prevents us from solving public safety issues, housing issues, transportation issues. You need look no further than the 2017 mayoral runoff map between Mary Norwood and Mayor Bottoms to see that we are a city of 2 cities. And we've got to bridge those divides in order to get past that and solve the challenges facing us. That's my background, and that's how I'll serve on council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldberg. And now, Mr. Gray, you have 1 minute.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters. I'm Todd Gray, candidate for Atlanta City Council, Post 1 at large. I'm before you today as a son of Atlanta. My mother graduated from Washington High School in the 1950s, later to retire from Eggleston Children's Hospital after working as a nursing assistant at Grady as well. My dad moved to Atlanta area from Butler, Georgia in the 1950s to escape segregation to provide better opportunity and drove taxis for 20 years. I stand on their shoulders. They're 81 years young today. I've been serving this community before I was the legal age to vote in the Collier Heights community, where I was dedicated as a child and ordained as a deacon. For 20 years, I've built award-winning supplier diversity programs that's actually created jobs in Atlanta, eradicated discrimination in employment, hiring, and also in contracting. And for 6 years, I served on the City of Atlanta's Board of Ethics, most recently as vice chair to fight corruption in City Hall, which has plagued this city for too long. And I stand before you bringing real experience, service, and solutions to the table for all of Atlanta.
Thank you, sir, very much. And our final opening statement will come from Mr. Jeremy Sharp.
Hey, y'all, and great afternoon. My name is Jareem Sharp, and I'm running for Atlanta City Council, Post 1 at large. As many of you know, our city is divided into 12 districts. When you see or hear at large, that does mean that citywide. So I look forward to representing all 12 districts and all almost 500,000 people in our city. So again, my name is Jareem Sharp. I'm running for Atlanta City Council Post 1 at large. I'm running on a mission to make our city the #1 city in America for everyone to live, love, work, and play. I'm 31 years old. I live right in the center of downtown Atlanta with my dog Zion. So you'll probably see us walking. I bike, I scoot everywhere. I also take MARTA. So I don't have a car. I'm very much into urbanism. And I have a background in real estate development, affordable housing. I've also worked in business development and digital cartography. So I love drawing maps like the one that you see behind me. I'll add that I do feel that our city right now very much sits at a crossroads, and we must take this opportunity to move our city forward towards a future that can work better for everyone. And I do believe that I'm the right candidate to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And I apologize for mispronouncing your first name. That's
no problem. Thank you.
Jareem. When you're convinced you want it, you hear lots of things. So I will get that correct going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank
you.
So
now we will begin our series of questions. Because this is a forum, we will hear from each candidate on all of the questions. And in an effort to move the questions around, we will start this first question in alphabetical order, the way we did these opening statements. With the next question, I will go to the next name in alphabetical order. So that would be Mr. Brooks, and then come back and then finish up with Mr. Vaughn. So this first question and the first series of questions that we have deal with crime. Crime in Atlanta has made national news. In 2020, the city saw 29 murders, 172 shootings, 626 aggravated assaults, 33 rapes, 255 robberies. What solutions, beginning with you, Michael Julian Bond, do you have to reduce crime and to improve public safety? Unmute yourself, Mr. Bond, and you have a minute to answer the question.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to build on what I've been doing. One of the things that we have done is that we need to get our complement of police officers back to the authorized strength of 2,000. We need to make sure that we are having enough police officers to patrol our city and to engage in community policing. We need to make sure that our police officers are better trained and better equipped and better distributed. Part of the legislation that I've introduced is that we did a zone realignment to make sure that we're adequately spreading our police around the community. And we're making sure that now we have a new public safety facility that's going to be built, but that's for the future. On the other side, we need to make sure that we're supporting programs like our pre-arrest development. We need to make sure that we are reinvesting in our Hope Centers and partnering with our sister government at the Atlanta Public Schools to make sure our kids have opportunities that are shared between our recreation centers and their school programs, and making sure that their school programs have an opportunity for them to not only have internships that the city pays for, but that they have an expanded training in the trades and building associations with our unions to make sure.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I will allow you to finish a sentence, but don't continue. But when I interrupt you, that means that we are at time, because we want to make sure we get all the questions in. Mr. Brooks, your ideas and solutions that you have to reduce crime and improve public safety.
Thank you. I think one of the things we have to be careful of is when one says, we'll continue to do what we have been doing, when we know that what has been done is not good enough for today. What I would do is guarantee a job for every young person, because our young people really need investment now more than ever. I would invest more in our parks and recs to make sure that our recreation centers become opportunities for hope and for promise for our young people, to keep them engaged, give them mentorship, and help them see a better way. I would also make sure that we invest in a state-of-the-art crime laboratory. Currently, the Atlanta Department, when trying to solve a crime, has to go to the GBI, and there are month-long delays which prevent us from actually solving crime and getting people who need to be off of the streets. Last, I'll say we need to better invest in PAD. Saying that investing $1.5 million in PAD police diversion would be enough is wrong. It only allows it to operate between the hours of 9 to 5, and we all know that people in the mental health crisis need more services than just 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. And lastly, I would say we need a duty to intervene for our police officers. Our public has an issue with trust And
Thank
right
you very
now,
much,
we don't
Mr.
do
Brooks.
that, we will never fix crime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And in an effort to help our candidates with timing, as you get to that 15-second mark, I'll probably do something like this and put my fist up in the air. That'll give you a sense that it's time for you to complete your thought. We are talking about crime. And now, Mr. Goldberg, it is your opportunity to take 1 minute to answer that question.
Thank you very much. And what we need to do is better prioritize what our police are doing. So I live in Midtown, where there's been an increase in crime, where we had that horrific murder in Piedmont Park not too long ago. Unfortunately, just one example. Meanwhile, cops are directing traffic. Cops are responding to zoning issues. Of course, those things need to be done, but we should be using civil enforcement folks to handle that, not sending uniformed police officers. We have more important things for them to be doing. We also need to expand other diversion opportunities like PAD, the Policing Alternatives and Diversion Initiative, for issues of mental health, for issues that we need different kinds of specialists to do. Our police are going to be staffed up, as the mayor has already announced. We need to ensure that there is effective but equitable training. I agree with President Obama and President Biden. The vast majority of police want to be doing a good job. We need to make sure that we enable them to do an effective and equitable job. At the same time, we need to audit the department on a regular basis to ensure we're getting the services that we expect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, Mr. Gray.
I would stand up with experience. I worked for Atlanta Police Department and understanding the training that our officers have went through. I believe in reimagining policing. We must have a community-based policing model so that when our police are on their beat and they're in the communities, the kids don't run first, but they run towards the officers because rapport was built. We need to look at crime in three facets. Crime has increased during this pandemic at the end of an economic disparity, predominantly in communities of color. So we need to understand, and what I bring to the table is experience about the whole macro issue through job creation, through training of our workforce, rehabilitation. We can deal with crime. We need to deal with the three prongs: mental health with empathy. We need to deal with homelessness with empathy. Sometimes it's that individual asking for their second or third meal. And we must be tough on crime to make those that want to be career criminals, let them know that Atlanta is not the place where that will exist. And I will do it.
Mr. Gray, thank you very much. And then our last candidate to speak on the issue of crime is Mr. Sharp.
So there's three areas that we'll need to focus on. The first area is ensuring that our youth have programs for after school and also summer programs that are paid. Our youth right now, they are experiencing income insecurity. And because of that, many crimes are being committed. That's just the reality of it. I think number two, we do need to also make sure that PAD does have the necessary resources and investment that they need. I believe officers as well as firefighters are all agreeing that they are not looking forward to responding to homelessness or responding to mental health issues. So we need to be investing into PAD, which is going to be able to provide us with professionals to handle those calls. And then lastly, we do need to fully staff out and train our police force. I'm not too sure that that needs to be the 2,000 number, but I do think that we need to reevaluate how many officers we need and then staff up to that point.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Our next question, and the first person to answer that question will be Mr. Brooks. Since the killing of George Floyd, the slogan, "Defund the police," is often heard. In your own words, sir, what does that mean to you? And what does that look like for the city of Atlanta?
What I believe is that we need to invest in our youth. I believe we need to invest in the education of our officers. Studies show that a police officer with at least 2 years of college education is 40% less likely to use force in the field and 45% less likely to use a firearm in the field. So I believe that we should be doing more investment. But we have to be more intentional about where we invest and how we invest. Now, of all the people on this panel, I'm one of the few that has marched consistently throughout the social movement of the last year. And what that looks like for me is having a real understanding of the distrust in our community. And the truth is that, listen, Our police clearance rate, the amount of crimes that we solve, is among the lowest in the entire country. And the reason why it is so low is because there is little cooperation between the community because of lack of trust. Last, I'll say, the reason why crime has risen is not about the pandemic. If you actually paid attention to the numbers, which no one ever cites the numbers, crime began to rise throughout the entire nation after May 25th, 2020, which is the day that George Floyd was killed. See, what people don't realize is that there is a national distrust for police. And until we heal that, we will never address crime, as well as having to address poverty to get to the source of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. And now, Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you. And to answer your question, what the phrase means is diverting resources to other ways to serve the community. For example, mental health and having more social workers. The issue that came up with the use of that particular phrase is that it was distorted very easily from that meaning to suggest removing the existence of police entirely. And that decision to use that phrasing ended up setting back the effort, because now the state legislature here in Georgia has limited the ability of the city to use those resources in a different way. I said we should fund PAD, the Policing Alternatives and Diversion Initiative, in the earlier answer, but now we are limited in using those funds. So we need to be more strategic in our messaging and more effective in communicating what it actually is that we need to do. We also need to recognize, as Mr. Brooks was saying, we need to look at the numbers and recognize that some of the issues have been going on in certain neighborhoods for years. It's happening now in Midtown and Buckhead at higher rates. Of course, that's not acceptable, but we need as a city to recognize this was going on elsewhere and we didn't care so much for quite a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldberg. And now, Mr. Gray.
I'm a strong and I stand firm in that we need to reimagine policing. Defunding the police department is not a solution to provide us the safety that we need in a city. We want a faster 911 response time. We must fund, but we must make sure there are clear metrics and incentives in place. We need to have an increased number of officers on the street, but increased training, community-based policing to where they're actually being proactive on crime versus chasing statistics. We must have more engagement from our nonprofits, from the Citizen Review Board, which is the citizens' voice of concern around policing. We must get involved. So when I hear defund the police, that is reallocation of funds to the question. But when I talk about reimagining policing, we need to police in the day and age in which we sit today post George Floyd. And I'm the one candidate on this panel today that has served and fought this across the entire United States of America. And I've done it here in Atlanta for 20 years. I've done it as an APD officer, and I will do it with real experience and not just statements as your next city council member and post 1 at large.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. And now, Mr. Sharp.
When I hear defund the police, it really depends on who I'm hearing it from. When I'm talking to those that are in the Northeast, I'm hearing that we want more police. When I'm talking to people that are in the Southwest, I'm hearing that many of them have had bad experiences historically with the police. So when we're talking about defunding the police, we are hearing two different conversations. But I think what's most important is that we need to be focused on more so what we need to be doing. So ultimately, everybody is asking, whether you're in town Atlanta, Northeast Atlanta, Southwest Atlanta, everyone is asking for a safer Atlanta at the end of the day. What again that looks like, I think that that's where we all have to take a step back and really rethink the entire system. But ultimately, one thing that we know without a doubt, talking to anybody, is that we have to fund our social services. That's what every officer is saying, every firefighter is saying, every person in the city. That's the one thing that they can all get behind, is making sure that we have more social services and that we're funding PAD out here in the streets.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. And Mr. Bond, you get the last word on this question about defund the police. Sir, you're on mute.
Trying to be obedient. As has been stated, defunding the police generally means taking the resources from the police department, moving somewhere else. Prior to the state legislature taking action to prevent municipalities from defunding the police, the margin in Atlanta simply wasn't there, because 89% of the police budget goes to salary and benefits, and we're restricted by state law. We have to pay those salaries and benefits. What needs to happen is that it's programs like PAD, other pre-arrest diversion programs, they don't come out of the police budget, they come out of the general fund. What I would recommend, and what I've tried to do, is to establish a separate funding allocation for public safety outside of the general fund, much like they have in Cobb County, where the public safety priorities are in their own budget, and then the general fund priorities are in a separate budget. And that would free the pressure from streets, highways, affordable housing, et cetera, for creating pressure on programs like PAD, because those things are shared in the general budget. We don't want to.
Very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. We now are going to move to a new subject, housing. And Mr. Goldberg, you are first to answer this question. Too many Atlantans, particularly those in communities of color, struggle to find adequate, healthy, and affordable housing for their families. In recent years, 17,000 new housing units have been added within the city limits. However, only 3,301 were priced at $1,000 or less. The question is, what is your solution to provide more affordable housing, and how would you protect legacy residents from being priced out of their homes due to rising property taxes?
I'm going to address that backwards. Thank you so much for the question. So the first point is that for legacy residents, we should be tying limits on the increase in property taxes to how long someone has lived in their home, but we should have limits across the board too, because with the way development is going in the city, even a new tenant could get priced out of their home with a rise in property taxes in just a couple years. So we do need to address both of those issues. We need to look to other cities, for example. How can we implement rent control in the city? For example, what are the ways that we can do something like that? We need to make sure that developers have sufficient affordable housing units and not give them an out. For example, give the city a bunch of money, we'll do affordable housing elsewhere, which never ends up happening. Meanwhile, the developer has an under amount of units. We need to look at that. And rezoning, which I imagine we'll talk about more, we need to address it on a neighborhood by neighborhood approach to make sure that we're working with the local communities to see what works where, but there is opportunity to rezone in certain parts of the city, those single family homes, to have more affordable units. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gray, you now get this question.
I stand on the work I've been doing for 20 years, and I do it today for Kaiser Permanente. I have built community benefit agreements and held developers accountable for equitable development. We have great plans in the city of Atlanta, but we far too often celebrate the pep rally and the plan. And we need leadership in place that has been proven and tested to actually get the work done. Our developers, when they get our tax allocation as a benefit to their development and their community goals for affordable housing, there will be consequences if those goals are not hit. In the city's procurement process, I'm the individual on this panel that stood up when the city's supplier diversity program almost sunset. What that is getting minority and women-owned businesses in Atlanta involved in a procurement process that creates jobs in the communities in which we are developing so that they have gainful employment and they hire other diverse individuals. That's a way to make the community affordable by actually meeting the goals the city sets and not just talking about the goals that we plan. And I have done this throughout my career, and I will continue to lead it. And when we talk about taxes, we need to protect our seniors, and we need to have appropriate freezes and funding so that our community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Thank you very much. Mr. Sharp.
So we're gonna do four things. One, that is ensure that our legacy residents are still remaining in place. That's two, also ensuring that our unsheltered population, our unsheltered residents have adequate housing over each and every one of them. Three, it's ensuring that our middle class have new pathways to home ownership. And it's four, ensuring that people that want more development, high-class development, world-class development, that we're also still bringing that to our city. What's great about Atlanta, in contrast to many other cities, is that we have enough land to make all of this happen for everyone. And when it comes to housing, I always look at it as more of a toolbox. And in that toolbox, we have about 12 or 15 different tools that we have to be using at the same time. But it's important for us to know how to use those tools, when to use those tools, and where to use those tools. And I believe that I may be the only one amongst us, or at least amongst the candidates, that has a background in real estate. So when we're talking about a housing crisis, I have experience in being able to solve those, especially in affordable housing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Now, Mr. Bond.
Thank you for the question. I have actually built affordable housing through the programs, through the West Side Tax Allocation District that I authored. That is both single family homes, and apartment homes. We need to continue to build upon that funding mechanism. I've also introduced legislation that makes all of the city's available property only available for the building of affordable housing. I've also made sure that we have had down payment assistance for families in certain neighborhoods and across the board. I've created the Stadium Trust Fund for the District 1, District 4 area so that they can reinvest in the communities in their area. I've also have been the author and now the co-author of the housing bonds for the city of Atlanta, both $50 million and now $100 million to do across the board a building of affordable housing, down payment assistance, rental assistance for families. And we continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. And Mr. Brooks, you get the last word on this question about affordable housing.
Thank you. Of all here, I'm the only one who's currently raising a family. I'm a first-time home buyer in this city, and I bought my home during the midst of the Great Recession. And what that did was afford me the opportunity to buy a house because the market was so depressed. However, today I couldn't afford to buy my own home from myself. We can talk about having more affordable living, but until we have a real conversation about how AMI is inflated, because incumbent politicians have allowed Atlanta to become the city with the worst wealth disparity gap in the country, where Black residents are making but $26,000 a year, and our white counterparts are making $96,000 a year, and we have an area median income of $86,000 a year. So when we talk about 80% of AMI, it just does not cut deeply enough to make the city affordable for more people. Average rent is $1,400. Look, I'm a teacher. If my wife were not a nurse, I wouldn't be able to afford to live in this city. So what we have to do is get more serious about creating more stock, or otherwise there will be no ability to suppress the price of unaffordability in this city. So it's time to get real about building more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. Again, in the area of housing, another question. Mr. Gray, you will be the first to answer this question and we will go around. Georgia has a very swift eviction process. A renter can receive an eviction notice as soon as missing one monthly payment. Atlanta's got one of the worst eviction rates in the city. If elected, how do you plan to help Atlanta residents stay in their homes after the eviction moratoriums have been completely exhausted and expire? Again, Mr. Gray.
What we have to do is make sure the resources that are allocated to Atlanta that we fight hard for are actually used for our citizens and not politicized. To this day, the CARES Act money in Atlanta only 11 cents on every dollar has been spent to this effectiveness. We must provide a funding through partnerships and resources to our tenants that face eviction so that when they end up in such a situation, the city has a bridge that can help sustain them until the time of need has expired. We also need to make sure we're partnering closer, and we need to have requirements in place for the next pandemic or any other natural disaster that we are facing in the city that hits our citizens. We need to make sure city services are operational and we don't have increased police wait times. We don't have an increased time to get a permit. We don't have an increased time to get somebody on the phone at City Hall. So we need to invest and prepare and stand up an office. We need to use the funds that we already have today to assist in this issue so that when it's only 1 month to get out, the city has built a solution. We have the resources. We need leadership that'll make those funds available.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Mr. Sharp.
So one, we need to create a permanent fund that is always going to be there so that whether we're in a pandemic or we're out of a pandemic, those that need any type of rental assistance, homeowner assistance, they're able to get it. So that's first, I think. Second, we need to ensure that there's the legal representation that many renters need. From stats, over 96% of renters are going to eviction court without any type of legal representation. So I believe that that's also something that the city can very much do. I think we do a great job in some ways in partnering with some organizations like the Volunteers Lawyers Foundation, But even when you're talking to them or even when you're researching them, also you'll find that they still don't have as much support as they need. And I think lastly, because of the laws in Georgia, one thing that I believe we can do is begin to work more with the court system to kind of slow down the eviction process so that our residents just have more time to access the resources that we're going to be able to provide to them, such as legal assistance and financial assistance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. And now, Mr. Bond.
Thank you for the question. One of the things we have done is that we have used the CARES Act funds to the degree that they were expended. And we have now allocated another $12 billion to help families in need of rental and mortgage payment assistance. And then secondly, I am currently working on legislation to, just in the same way that we expanded our public defender's office responsibilities to aid those who are here who are immigrants. I'm doing the same thing on rental assistance and evictions. Also, we have put in our legislative package year in and year out, asking the state of Georgia, who has the authority, to amend the eviction process. As it relates to that, I've also changed the law in Atlanta where people are not penalized if they are evicted, and they have time to get their belongings out of the properties. And of course, within the properties that we influence, either that are contract with Atlanta or Atlanta owned or Atlanta affiliated, we have suspended all evictions during the pandemic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. And now, Mr. Goldberg, we're talking about eviction and eviction moratoriums.
Sure, I think we went out of order, but I'm happy to go before Mr. Brooks. So very quickly.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're absolutely correct. And I actually do know how to read. Mr. Brooks, go ahead.
It's all right. To be honest with you, Brandon kind of got his brain turned into go. I'll be more than happy to allow him the time and be more than happy to go after. We're going to give you grace, Ms. Presley. You're doing a great job.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Goldberg. And then I'll come back to Mr. Brooks. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. So we need to first differentiate dealing with folks who are having trouble making the payments and folks, tenants who have committed a crime, done property damage, something like that. Those are very different circumstances. I do support legal defense funds for low income people, tenants who are going to face these issues. That should be a broad definition of low income, but we don't need to be helping millionaire renters pay for a civil defense. We also need to recognize that while there is some assistance available in the city, and it certainly needs to be expanded, most people don't know that it actually exists. Like any number of types of services in the city, we on council must do a better job of informing people about what's available, be it through 311 or what have you. And we can work with landlords to make sure they're giving this information to the tenants when the tenants start to fall behind. We should preempt the problem, not wait until they're facing eviction. And lastly, we need to remember that a lot of homeowners are mom and pop operations. So the rent can't just not get paid because then the mom and pop owners can't pay the mortgage to the bank takes the home, and the tenant still gets evicted. So we need to deal with it at that level as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Brooks, you get the last word on this question.
Thank you. I truly believe that much of this is by design. Our city has worked so hard to develop in so many areas without regard of what this would do to the lack of affordable living within our city. And until we get serious about addressing the lack of affordability, we will never address the root cause of this issue. I think too often we focus on dealing with the symptom of the issue. So what I say is that we really need to invest in our education system better. We have to partner with our schools better. We have to make sure that as our young people become professionals and folks who get to own businesses, that we also retain them within our communities, because too often we see brain drain going to other places throughout the city, investing in those places and not keeping it right at home. I always tell my students, don't sell grandma's house. And we see it often, but typically grandma gets priced out before you even get the opportunity to sell it. So what I say is we really need to focus on those things. Additionally, we need to offer legal assistance for folks so that they're able to defend themselves. But no person in Atlanta should be priced out of Atlanta. It's time for us to get serious about having more availability for affordable living. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. Now let's talk a little bit about transportation and transit. And Mr. Sharp will be the first to answer this question. An expanded regional transit network is critical to keeping Metro Atlanta economically competitive. If elected to the city council, sir, how would you improve mobility and transportation in the city?
Because you mentioned kind of the region, I'll talk about some of the work that I've already been doing. So there's Evermore going up Highway 78 now. And if you know Highway 78 coming all the way from Stone Mountain, Snellville, it's backed up every single day. I've already been working with Evermore Improvement District to come up with these auxiliary lanes on both sides of the road where not only are we moving trucks, but we're also going to be able to move public transportation a lot faster. I take the train every Thursday, the bus every Thursday, usually not this Thursday, out to Gwinnett County where my parents live. And on Fridays, I'll take that back into the city. So I'm intimately familiar with the regional transportation issues that we have. But in addition to that, I regularly meet with the transportation planner from the Atlanta Transportation Authority link to talk about regional transportation issues. This is something that is near and dear to my heart as a MARTA rider, not having a car. So I have skin in the game, and it's something I'll be fighting for every single day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Michael Julian Bond, let's talk transportation.
One of the things that I've already done is that when we did the More MARTA plan, I made sure that we put in for more BRTs, making sure that we have first mile, last mile opportunities for folks going to and from as they use our public transportation system. I also successfully got attached to the project to finish out the old Proctor Creek line that expands from the Bankhead MARTA station to the end of the city of Cobb County. We're making sure that we're building out the BRTs in lower West Atlanta and extreme Southeast Atlanta, so that we make sure that those are the areas of the city that are most in dire need of transportation opportunities. Those projects got added. We've got to continue to build on that and making sure that we have modal by demand, by request within our framework at MARTA, and making sure that people can access it throughout the city and to keep MARTA affordable.
Thank you very much, Michael Julian Bond. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you. You know, one of the things that I know about MARTA is that it has actually been used as a tool for redlining in the metro Atlanta region. If you pay attention, there are particular areas throughout our city where you cannot access because MARTA is not allowed to be there. So I think one of the things that we have to do is partner better with some of our surrounding metro Atlanta areas to allow access to MARTA in more places. Secondly, we have to make sure that we have more covered stops. No one wants to stand in the rain or in the snow or in the heat without coverage. And so we have to make sure that it's more convenient for people to actually experience. It's a better experience in itself. Last, I would say, we also need to make sure that the MARTA board includes people who not only use MARTA, but who really depend on MARTA, because I believe that people who really use the service know best what is needed in order to make it what it should be. And I think it's time for us to get real about that. Until we have people who actually need this service making the decisions for it, I think we'll continue to have out of touch policies. And this is why we're getting the issues that we're getting right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. Now, Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you. And the way that we hold them accountable is by having a council that actually questions and holds people accountable in open committee sessions and full council meetings. We shouldn't be disrespectful like the US Congress, but we should be as intense as the US Congress in questioning officials and partners of the city about projects like More MARTA that fall behind, what we're going to do to fix it, and why we're in the position that we're in the first place. I commuted on MARTA for 6 years before the pandemic. We need to expand its existence and its use. For the bus system, there's a barrier to entry, which is if you don't use it on a regular basis, it's hard to figure out how to even start using it. We need to make sure people can use the buses as they need to. We need to make sure it's safe to use bikes and scooters in this city. And we can accomplish two things at once when it comes to street racing. By having more elevated crosswalks, you'll provide more safety for people who are on foot or using bikes, etc. At the same time, limiting the ability of cars to do street racing. So we need to think multifaceted, solve multiple problems at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldberg. And now, Mr. Gray.
When we talk about More MARTA, we need to make sure we also have more access points. We need to deal with sidewalk equity and last mile equity in the city. There are communities where you can get off the MARTA bus in the city and go right into your apartment. There are communities in this city to where you get off the MARTA bus and you're walking around dangerous roads and corners, not even putting your own safety at risk, but endangering pedestrians and drivers as well. So we need to work on this more holistically. We need sidewalk equity in the city. We need to make sure our alternative modes of transportation, such as scooters and other items that the cities have contracts with, that they're regulated and used for their intended use and not misused for soliciting sales or not misused on property that is private. So what I would do day one is make sure I'm not serving the city in a vacuum, but make sure we deal with our unequitable communities that do not have access to the bus stop, because it is their lifeline to work, to school, and they must get there safely and dependably.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Speaking of getting to work and to school and places safely, let's talk a little bit about work. The Atlanta region is a leader when it comes to jobs growth, but too many good jobs are going unfilled. More than half of the jobs in Atlanta require at least a bachelor's degree, while only 5 meet that requirement. So now, what is your solution to help break the cycle of underskilled, low-paying employment so that many others of low-paying employment that so many of the City of Atlanta residents are facing today? And Michael Julian Bond, you are first on this question, sir.
Thank you very much. We need to continue to build on the improvements that we've made, changing our workforce development agency and putting it under the development of Invest Atlanta, which is our developmental authority. So we can have a more well-managed job training apparatus. We need to also reach out to our unions and trades. They have apprenticeship programs. There is there's great access there to get people trained. But we also need to have a real conversation with our Atlanta public school system to make sure that we put those hand skills, the trade skills back into our high schools. We need to make sure that the kids who are at the same age that they are in high school are still susceptible to the allure of the street, to gang activity. We need to make sure that they know how that they can develop a trade so that they can work with their hands. There are many entrepreneurs on our street, our water boys. We've allocated money to have them trained and to bring them into the training program. And we need to expand that. We need to expand our internship program that the city does in the summer.
Thank you very much.
School system.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Brooks.
So I'm a high school teacher, and one of the first things I tell my students on day one is that your boss will never pay you enough to be their neighbor. The truth is that many of our young people really seek to have some financial freedom, and the only way that they'll really attain it is to be able to engage in entrepreneurship. And I see our Parks and Recs department, our park centers, as an opportunity for us to bring in many entrepreneurs who are doing this work in today's time to coach young people on how they could create for themselves. And I think this would actually be an appropriate use for the Atlanta City Detention Center once we actually close it, once I come on the council. Additionally, I'll say that it's time for us to have more apprenticeships, internships, and guaranteed jobs with Fortune 500 and 100 businesses for our young people. Last, I will say we really have to work better with our school system to make sure that our young people are being tooled for the jobs that are available in many of these businesses that come to Atlanta. Last, and I know I said last already, but last, seriously, we do have to start engaging in dual enrollment for our young people so they can start getting college credits while in high school and expanding that so we can decrease the cost of college, which tends to be prohibitive for many of our young people to get those jobs.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you very much. And what we need to be doing is connecting our students with people who have jobs, who are successful entrepreneurs, who have all kinds of opportunities for them that do exist, and that we can guide students into being prepared for that, both at the college level and in APS. I've known the chair of our public school board, Jason Estevez, for 15 years. We were classmates together. I will work with him and the entire school board to make sure that we as council are doing everything we can to build those bridges. Even if it doesn't have to be an ordinance, we're not going to be able to pass a lot of ordinances, but we can use our influence to build those connections. We also need to have expectations of the new companies that are setting up headquarters here in Atlanta. They should be good corporate citizens, and we should be making sure that they are connecting with all facets of our community to provide various types of employment opportunities. Lastly, we need more private partnerships in the city. So what are these big companies doing with, say, a restaurant that struggled during COVID? We as the city should not be telling small business owners how to run their business, but we can provide mentorship, possible grants, those connections between larger companies and smaller companies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldberg. And now, Mr. Gray.
In this space, I'll tell you what I will do. not what we need to do, and also what I've done. In this space of job creation, when we have development in Atlanta, when they announce that we're going to create thousands of jobs, we need to add one more thing. Those jobs need to be local jobs. I'll hold them accountable. I have. When we have projects in Atlanta, we already have supply diversity goals in place that can stop the bad side of gentrification by including minority-owned businesses. The goal is there. The program almost got lost under City Council. Myself and my board members on the Atlanta Business League went and made sure that did not happen. We retain who stays in the community. When we employ our small, local, and diverse businesses, they hire in the community. At Grady, I moved that diversity spend from 3% to 33% throughout my tenure. What that means is we created jobs in Atlanta, tens of thousands of jobs. I work with the Construction Skill Development Institute to get young women in construction, to fight for women to have equal pay in jobs, and to improve minority businesses and mentor them across the state. To the tune to under my leadership, we have spent over $1 billion at Grady alone with minority and women-owned businesses and reskilled workforces. And I'll do it on City Council.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. And now Mr. Sharp.
So one place that we can be looking is, in this perfect world, is working with all of the different businesses and bringing them all in and ensuring that our youth have guaranteed jobs right when they're coming out of summer and after school. That's certainly one area that we can focus on. But I think that we also need to be looking at just the fact that we're in a new economy. Businesses are looking for different talents. And when we know that, then we're going back to the school system and we're saying to the school system that we need to make sure that our youth are on track for different pathways. Traditionally, we've been targeting them towards the collegiate path. We need to be also gearing them towards the trade school path or also the entrepreneur path, because our new reality is that all of them, and also our old reality is that everyone is not going to end up go to college. So this collegiate path of needing degrees and a bachelor's, that's just not where we are anymore. So we really need to be focused again on APS and ensuring that there are different pathways to success for our youth.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Mr. Brooks, you'll be first on our next question, and it has to do with the homeless people in our community. What is your plan for tackling that issue?
You know, you bringing this topic up honestly just kind of emotionally triggered me because I spend a lot of time downtown and throughout our city working arm in arm with our unsheltered population. Currently, Atlanta has over 3,200 unsheltered individuals in the city, yet we have 900 acres of undeveloped land. We have abundance of funding and private partnerships and nonprofit partnerships that really are not doing the work in a collaborative way to actually eliminate the necessity of their business. What we need to do is actually start developing transitional housing. We have to start investing in our mental health services and being a bridge and for people to get to where they need to. You know, before I was a teacher, I worked for the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Disabilities for 6 years. And I'd always worked with people throughout the community on what it is that they need. And the truth is they just need hope. They just need an opportunity. They just need the ability to be able to go to school, to get a real job, to be able to pay a sustainable wage, but it will never happen as long as this city continues to be unaffordable and doesn't give people access to the things that they really need. And I'm going to fix that when I get on council. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you very much. And first of all, we need to stop criminalizing homelessness. We need to work with PAD, who should be responding in non-police, non-criminal situations, just to help these folks. When you see a situation of someone who needs intervention, we should send someone who will be a warm approach, who can actually help these folks with their immediate, that moment needs. We need to, as Mr. Brooks said, use city-owned land to build housing for folks who have no home. Once you give someone a home, they then have mental energy to commit to finding a job if they can, to then support themselves. We can free up that mental energy. A rising tide lifts all ships. I know people pay rent and mortgage, I do, but we need to help everyone together. Unsafe shelters keep people on the streets. So we need to work with nonprofits and our religious institutions to make sure that shelters are safe and respectful. If people don't want to go there, they feel it's not dignified. We need to change that. And lastly, HOPWA, the HIV and AIDS housing, a perfect example where the city can and fails to provide money, to work with nonprofits, to not reinvent the wheel, and money just sits unused. We're going to lose these grants like we did with workforce development. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goldberg. And now, Mr. Gray.
One of the first things we have to do, we receive funds to eradicate these issues in our city. But if we do not use those funds for its intended purposes, what's happened over and over in our city, we lose the funds. And those most vulnerable in our community suffer, go without another meal, and go without a warm place to sleep at night. So what we must do is make sure this city is going to continue to grow. That's going to be a fact. But we need to make sure that a homeless shelter is not just thought about as an eyesore that must go away when development happens. We need to make sure a homeless shelter is a path to rehabilitation. We need to meet that with education and resources and partner with nonprofits who already are the experts. We must utilize our services more specifically to address this issue. We also must deal with homelessness across the city. We do not have to make this be one designated area in Atlanta, but we need to have strategic centers in every district to deal with this issue. These are not criminals or those that are a sore thumb to our society. A lot of individuals in this city are one step away, one rent payment away, and one job opportunity away. We have to deal with it differently.
Thank you.
In doing it, and we'll get it done.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Mr. Sharp.
So we really have to look at homelessness in a whole new way. What we know without a doubt is what we've been doing, the partnerships we have, whatever ordinances that have been passed and previously, those are not working anymore. That's without a doubt. So we have to stop talking about, again, and this is no offense at all, what we've done. It's not working. You can go down to City Hall today. People are out there with tents right now. So we have to really and truly talk the talk and also be walking the walk every single day. So that's actually talking with Partners for Home, talking with Hope for Atlanta, looking to bring them all together to be on the same page to actually solve homelessness. I have been homeless. I've been inside of homeless shelters, living in them, inside of SROs. I've gotten in and I've been able to get out. I know exactly what the system is like from back to front, top to bottom. So when we're talking about homelessness, one, and most importantly, we really have to make sure that we're presenting the right solutions. For too long, we've been presenting the wrong solutions, and that's why we still have the crisis that we have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. And Michael Julian Bond, you'll get the last word on this question.
Well, thank you. This is an issue that's near and dear to me, something that I've been close to for more than 30 years, not just when I decided to run for office. So I've worked in and around this space for 30 years. And one of the things I'm excited about what the city has done, particularly in the last 2 years, with Catherine Marshman as the head of our homeless initiative. And we've been able to put money in place that moved over 700 families from a state of homelessness to home ownership, or either they're renting their own places as late as April of this year. And so that cycle starts all over again. The challenge that we have here is not that we don't have programs that work, is that Atlanta is a magnet for individuals who are suffering in this space. And so we need to continue to build upon the partnerships that we have. We want to remind everyone that the majority of homeless shelters in the city of Atlanta are operated by nonprofits. And so we've had a successful model through the pandemic, and we're looking for opportunities to expand that. We were able to use the hotel down there on Hank Aaron Boulevard to house these families. They made a commitment to the neighborhood that they would only do it for a period of time. So we're looking for—
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. Thank you very much. I need to move to a new topic. And that topic is green space, and Mr. Goldberg will be the first to answer the question. In the last few weeks and days, we've all heard about the new police training facility that has been adopted by council. Now, one of the most concerning issues is the location of the facility, and that the location is one of the last undisturbed green spaces inside of the perimeter. Mr. Goldberg, what are some of your proposals to keep and secure Atlanta's natural greenery?
Well, we could start by council actually passing ordinances and enforcing them that protect those spaces from future development of any kind. And we need to make those ordinances something strong and something that will be effective. You know, this situation with the training center, the green space is just one part of it, but this is something that should have been identified up front. And so we had a situation where the two sides of the issue fought over the space for so long, which was a lack of leadership. The division should have been identified up front, and another location identified at that moment, not after a year of fighting. And so we need to protect the space. We have a lot of derelict buildings. We have a lot of buildings that can be, that are abandoned, that can be developed. We should start by repurposing developed land before we start knocking down trees. We see flooding all across the city. It's because we're getting rid of our tree canopy. It's because we're destroying our green space. And so it's not just a nice thing to have. It's not just a quality of life thing. It will literally save lives by impacting the flooding and stopping. Thank you.
Mr. Gray, how do you preserve the city's green space?
The city of Atlanta has long been known as the city in the forest. And with that, we must preserve that not only through ordinance, because that's pen to paper, but we have to be on the ground making sure it's effective and penalize those that do not follow that lead. In addition to that, when we talk about the police training facility, not only was it against the public will, where in an elected seat, we should follow our constituents' voices, but still lead with a clear head, but we must make sure that we're utilizing our assets that would be less detrimental to our environment. I serve on the board today, the South Fork Conservancy, that protects the creeks that flow from Peachtree Creek all the way down to the ports of Savannah. I walk those trails once a month and go out there and clean up trash, feed the homeless that are there, and make sure it's a natural habitat in our communities. We must protect that in Atlanta, and that is work that I will be tough on, because without our environment, we can't thrive in any other area.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Mr. Sharp.
Because we mentioned the safety training facility, I do want to touch on something that I feel like we haven't been talking about enough, which is not only the process, but the fact that we did not have a process for that safety training facility. That facility sits outside of MPU boundaries. That facility also sits outside of the Atlanta city limits. So yes, as a city, we do own that land. As taxpayers, we do own that land, but unfortunately, there was no process for that land. And that's whether it's a police training facility, if that's a business, we want to put a Chuck E. Cheese there, it doesn't matter. There was no process for doing that. So one of the very first things we need to do is ensure that moving forward, we have a process for any land that sits out of the Atlanta city limits or out of NPU boundaries, because if we don't, this will just happen again. I'll add that I believe that our officers need first-in-class training, but having a real estate background, what I know, with the over 900 acres or 400 usable acres that we have of city-owned land, I can pretty much guarantee that there were other parts of the city or other land that we could have utilized, which would have meant we would have been able to conserve that entire park, all 300 acres.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Mr. Bond.
Well, I think I want to clear up some misinformation. First, they're not going to use the total 300 acres on that site. It's only going to be built upon what is built upon today. That site is a mile in every direction from the nearest neighborhood, and the neighborhoods contiguous to the site on the east side of Moreland to support the project. They came out in support of the project, and it was a necessary project. What I've done, I am the author of the citizens version of the tree protection ordinance, working with tree activists for the last 18 months to perfect it. It is before the council now. I've worked to protect what is now the new West Side Park as an activist. In the early 2000s, we saved it from becoming the largest garbage transfer station in the world. As a council member, we have protected all of the interior tree canopies within the city of Atlanta that were available for us to purchase and to protect. And I've always protected trees, but we still need to go beyond it because we need to have the help of the state legislature, because property rights go to the person who wants to develop the property. And it's very difficult to stop them without help.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. And now Mr. Brooks.
The process of this police training facility was abhorrent. And it shows how politicians are truly in bed with the Atlanta Police Foundation, and they allow them to be, they become a rubber stamp for whatever it is that they want. And it's just sad, truly, to see. This development is a form of environmental racism. You are building buildings that will be burnt over and over in the backyard of Black babies in DeKalb County. And it's no stranger to Mr. Bond or his campaign. His campaign manager is burning tow cars, who built a recycling plant in the backyard of Black babies in DeKalb County. And this is just something that they do. And I think it's very sad that we allow people like this to lead in our community and impose harm on our community. And it's hard for us to see it because they look like us. So we trust them to do the right thing. Well, if we do the right thing, then we could be finding impervious land, because yes, our police department needs a state-of-the-art training facility. They also need a state-of-the-art crime lab so they can solve the crimes once we train them. These things are necessary, but we can do it on impervious land, and we don't have to do it at the scale that he's doing it at, because it is insensitive and tone deaf to everything we marched for last year.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
I'd like to rebuttal. I would like, since I've been respectful of everyone on the panel. I have not personalized anything, but since I was mentioned, I would like the opportunity to rebut.
But there are no rebuttals per the rules. There were no rebuttals.
It was also in the rules not to make personal attacks, but you violated that.
These are facts. This is not personal. This is facts.
And they need
gentlemen, as I am receiving the rules from the league and the organizers of this forum, which is why it's a forum, not a debate. That is why there is not a rebuttal. Gentlemen, I need to move on so that we can have an opportunity to hear from the constituents who are watching. And then if at the end in your closing, you have something else you'd like to say, that would be the appropriate time to do that. So I want to talk about young people. Researchers find that most students need to read proficiently by the end of third grade in order to be successful in their future studies as well as their careers. In the city of Atlanta, only 40% of third graders are hitting that mark. How do you plan, if elected, on working with APS to make sure that the next generation of Atlanta residents are prepared to be successful? Mr. Gray, you are first on this question.
If you want to see the priorities of the city, you can look at the budget. And I will make sure when we have tax allocations that it's not at the detriment of the quality of our schools. I would also make sure our schools are equitably resourced, even though we have a standalone APS that's outside of the jurisdiction of city council. We must understand our responsibility as representatives of every citizen in Atlanta and reach across the aisle and partner. So when we're partnering in that influence, we need to make sure that the dollars are always protected that can support our students and our schools. We need to make sure also in our communities that they can get to school safely, because if they don't get to school consistently and safely, then there's no door to education. And then we need to make sure in the pandemic that it's not assumed that every household has internet to continue a productive education. And we need to make sure we're working with nonprofits that can help with early childhood education. And some of the things that we see as indicators really provide a solution to it. We have to just be proactive in this area, and it's something that we cannot ignore, and our future depends on it, and we must do it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gray. Mr. Sharp?
So I think I'm going to take my mom's lead on this one. She's a teacher out in Gwinnett County, and she works with special needs kids, and she was able to partner with Chick-fil-A to bring a Chick-fil-A to the school. And it was to, in particular, teach those that have disabilities how to still do things. It was the realization that, again, all of them will not go to college. And that's why we have to be really working with APS to ensure that they realize that we need to have our youth on different pathways for success. But that program ended up extending to those that were also throughout the school to, again, be able to give them those trade skills that they need for the new economy that we're about to go into. One fact that I kind of know just by doing by being in real estate is that our housing crisis or our affordability is also coming from us having a lack of construction workers. And that's something that, again, we should be having our youth already lined up for: plumbing jobs, trade school jobs, any of those that are really giving them the income that they need. So that's how I look forward to doing it. Again, following my mom's lead and partnering with a lot of the great corporations that we have to provide those services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Mr. Bond. You're on mute, Mr. Bond.
Thank you very much for the question. We need to build a closer partnership with Atlanta public school system, much the same way as we need the first and last mile connectivity with MARTA and public transportation. We still need that first and last access in our communities with our schools. We need to make sure that our children have a safe environment. We need to make sure that we have a partnership with APS in our after-school programming. I'm all about making sure that we have all of our centers of hope up and running, but we need a partnership with the school to get the students there. We need to be ever increasing our relationship and closeness with them because we all are invested in our children's future and their success.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. Mr. Brooks.
As a teacher, I'm grateful to answer this question, and shout out to Jareem Sharp's mother, who is a former co-worker of mine and a woman who I really appreciate dearly. She was a great educator who I learned from. As a person who is endorsed by many of the members of the Atlanta Public School Board, I think I'm actually best positioned to partner with APS as they need new leadership in this seat that is not aggressive or apropos to the things that APS needs. What we must do is I would be willing to dedicate part of my office funding to create programs to incentivize young people to read for fun. As a teacher, what I know is this: the students who score the best, who perform the best, and who are the most successful are the students who have the highest Lexile scores. And the only way to increase a student's Lexile scores is for them to read for entertainment. Not only read because they're told to do it, but because they're positively incentivized to do it. So whether that means we have pizza parties at school, whether that means we do jamborees or jump parties or concerts or bring their favorite influencers, whatever it's going to take to get young people to read, I will be willing to put my own money where my mouth is to make sure that they get what they need.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you. If we learned anything during the pandemic with kids doing school from home, is that teachers need to be paid a lot more money for having the kids on their watch all day long. Teachers should not be paying for supplies out of their own pockets. When you treat teachers with respect, they're going to be more engaged. It's just a natural result, and then the kids will be more engaged. We need to work at the state and federal level to make sure that we don't have restrictions in terms of these other opportunities. Leave No Child Behind was left all kinds of children behind. So we need to be advocates for the city on council to the other levels of government. We also need to work with businesses, community organizations, nonprofits to give those exciting opportunities at all ages, internships for those who are older. But you bring kids to a fire station, you bring them to a lab at any age, it's going to be exciting, interesting. It's not sitting in a classroom reading. We do need to reimagine education because when the kids are excited, they're going to want to learn more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldberg. We have one final question that I have, and then we will be able to take questions from our attendees in the audience. We've all seen the young men on the corners selling water. They're called the water boys. They've been mentioned earlier in this forum. Many organizations, along with the city, are working very hard to provide some guidance and opportunities for these young men. However, what are some of the solutions that each of you would have to expand youth services, especially for these kids who may not be natural entrepreneurs? And Mr. Sharp, I would start with you.
I don't even know if this is just all about youth services anymore. I really think it's almost as simple as partnering with all these Fortune 500 companies that we have in our city, and also partnering with the small businesses that we have in our city, and literally bringing everyone to the table and saying, hey, right now we have X amount of people that are in our schools or our youth or our water boys in particular that need jobs. And we have X amount of jobs in our city that are open. We have to figure out how to connect them. And we also have to look at why that has not already been done. For years, we've had these companies in our city. And I'll tell you, I've spoken with some of them on the phone, and you can call them now. And what I have heard is that they have not talked to anyone at city council in building new programs or providing direct pathways for our youth to be able to get jobs. And I haven't talked to all of them, no, but I have talked to a good bit of them, some of the top ones, and especially the newer tech ones that are coming in our city. So I think that that is one of the best things that we can do, is really and truly having true, real conversations with these corporations, with these small businesses, and also with these up and coming technology companies coming into our city to ensure that our youth have jobs.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Next, Michael Julian Bond. And sir, again, you're on mute.
Thank you. one of the things we actually have done is set aside funding for the training of these young men, and have already reached out to our corporate community, probably not the same as Mr. Sharp has talked to, but we have reached out to corporate leaders across the city to help to develop an entrepreneurship program for these young men. And we have been in discussions, soft discussions with members of the school board, members from the Fulton County Commission, to see how we can build a better entrepreneurship permanent training program for them, for our youth, because they need economic development and training. I mean, if you can get up on a hot summer day in Atlanta, 99 degrees, and stand on the corner and sell water, you've got a great entrepreneurial spirit. And so we need to nurture that. So we're putting in place the building blocks for that. And I'm hoping that we will be able to have something in place by our second quarter in January.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Brooks?
Thank you. Look, I commend every effort to invest in these young people who are entrepreneurs on the corner. I am an entrepreneur myself. And where I've been successful in my entrepreneurship is through social media and tapping into e-commerce. And I think that's one of the areas where these young people have a great opportunity to become the next content creators, to become the next venturers in e-commerce. I think it's time for us to use our Parks and Recs department, our rec centers, to be able to give these young people mentorship and opportunities. I would also tap the shoulder of companies like Coca-Cola and say, these young men are out there selling your products. I think it's time for you to pay it forward back to the city of Atlanta and invest in these young people so that they can become owners and have equity in the products that they sell, so that they actually will be able to advance their lives. I think once we close the Atlanta City Detention Center and it becomes a center for opportunity and hope, that this is the type of work and the perfect opportunity for us to get these young people off of the corners in these dangerous situations and into something safer with more promise and more longevity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brooks. Now, Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you. And first, I don't like the phrase water boys. I think it's pejorative. I think that it brings a negative connotation to these kids who are just trying to make some money, do something with their time that in the vast majority of cases is not in a negative way. In terms of the practice itself, we also have to recognize that in different parts of the city, there's a different level of safety to them doing it. On the east side, it's much safer for them to be doing it. Here in Midtown on 10th and 14th Street, they're on scooters going in between cars while the light is green and the cars are in motion. Very different situation. And so we need to consider allowing it where it is safe, but not allowing it where it's dangerous. We shouldn't try to stop it entirely. Girl Scouts can sell cookies, these boys can sell water, quite frankly. But let's get down to the business here. In the unsafe areas, after we've made it very clear to the kids and to drivers that this is a no-go area because it's too dangerous, the kids are going to get killed, we still don't do anything to the kids. We ticket the drivers. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Goldberg. Mr. Gray?
Yeah, we have to definitely lean in on our corporate partners that call Atlanta home as well. I am a leader that stood up at Grady that worked with the Construction Skills Development Institute to make sure we create a clear pathway utilizing the entrepreneurs that made Atlanta the city it is today. We have to meet these kids exactly where they are. We must understand their real situations. These are kids of parents that have been displaced because of decisions made in the city. We need to provide them a bridge to an opportunity by teaching them entrepreneurship, because that's what they truly are, displaying their heart versus selling drugs or anything else they could be doing. But we also must be real about some of the things that are happening indirect to the situation at hand. So when we stand up programs to get out and partner with the Water Boys, we need to make sure we see it through. I'm part of the 100 Black Men, and we have a electronics and robotic program that we've been working with inner city youth. We need to create that bridge, and we have done that. I've worked with kids across the city to help them find a path to entrepreneurship, and we need to make sure that we're not just calling the cops on them, but we're meeting where they are. Second point to this, we need to understand what's going on today. Some of these water boys are now being compromised by gangs, and it's much deeper than them with endlessly selling water, where now they're being threatened and their lives have been threatened if they're not selling this water. So we got to be
very much, Mr. Gray. I apologize for interrupting you, but that was time, and that was time, all the time that I have for the questions that I have prepared for this evening. Now it is an opportunity and my pleasure to introduce Kathy Carpenter, who will facilitate this next segment of our forum, where you all will be able to receive questions from the attendees to tonight's forum. Kathy.
Good evening. We have a two-part question. Would you support an ordinance that would mandate every City of Atlanta contract to allocate a percentage of jobs for that project go to local residents? Number two, would you create an ordinance that establishes or reestablishes set aside contracts for minority-owned businesses? Mr. Bond?
Am I muted?
No, we can hear you.
Thank you. No, there's already an ordinance for the first part of the question that was drafted by Jabari Samama called the first source ordinance, that all contracts of the city of Atlanta are underneath and obligated to hire local people. And secondly, I am the author of 3 renewals of the minority and business enterprise ordinance within the city of Atlanta, and have just introduced on Monday a third update drafted by Attorney Rodney Strong. So yes, I do support those concepts.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. Mr. Brooks?
Absolutely, I would support that, but also that it was enforced. It's one thing to say that we pass legislation deeming it necessary. It's another thing to make sure that we audit these contracts and make sure that it comes to fruition. To the latter part of the question, I would definitely make sure that we are contracting with minority-owned businesses, but I would have a special incentive specifically for Black women-owned businesses. As a majority of new businesses created in Atlanta are Black women-owned businesses, but only 4% are able to get the capital they need to reach a scale to employ others. So we not only need to be creating businesses, but we need to access capital the scale to create jobs for others. And so I would be very intentional about doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Mr. Goldberg?
Thank you. You know, the very existence of the question shows that it's an issue that's not been well informed to the community, once again, by City Council. And as Mr. Brooks said, probably not something that's being enforced too well either. Folks in Boston should have jobs, just not at the expense of the people of Atlanta. And we need to make sure that, especially as remote work is here to stay because of the pandemic, we are making sure that the jobs that should be here geographically continue to be here. And then we can go to LA and get some of those jobs to be located here also, by the way. In terms of making sure that minority owned companies are getting those opportunities, we need to go find them. We can't expect them to know about the opportunities of the city. We should work with the organizations like the Georgia Hispanic Chamber of Commerce and all of the counterparts to make sure we're advertising, hey, come to us, get these opportunities, we will give them to you. We can't just hold it up and say, well, who's going to show up on day one for this? No one knows about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gray?
My answer to this question is yes and yes. And I'm the person here that spent every minute up until the start of this forum doing that work. I've led supplier diversity for 20 years. I've led it at Wachovia Bank when I was the person in this city making sure that our communities of color had access to financial literacy and were included in the Community Reinvestment Act and were the diverse contractors on our facilities. I made sure of that when I headed supplier diversity for CVS Health to make sure we had retail pharmacies in access of all communities. And there was no such thing as underserved. And the products on the shelves in those communities came from Black women, minority, LGBT, and veteran-owned businesses that were local to Atlanta. And I lead that today for Kaiser Permanente. And I also understand how many contracts go through our city procurement to where we set the goal and the goal does not happen. And that's what our communities look like when our communities are broken and we see gentrification. We have a great system. It just has to be implemented. It has to be done. And the city was built on it.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Mr. Sharp?
To the second part of the question, we do have the set-asides, but unfortunately, those set-asides aren't specific enough. And I love what Mr. Brooks said, is that we need to also make sure that those set-asides are specifically for Black women in our city. But I think a part of that is also the contracts themselves. We have to make sure that our businesses are even qualified for these contracts. What's happening a lot is that the requirements or the qualifications of these contracts cannot be met. And that's a part of the problem. We have to readjust the requirements and qualifications of the contracts, but we also have to make sure that the businesses that are applying for the contracts are in the right shape. They have the right tools, they have the right training. And that's not what we're seeing right now. The businesses are out there. But again, they are not able to, for many different reasons, actually get the contracts because many times they're not qualified for them. So we have to make sure that they're qualified to get these contracts also.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Now I'll go in reverse order. Mr. Sharp, how would you bring Black businesses to Southwest Atlanta?
Piggybacking on what Mr. Goldberg said, we can no longer wait for real estate agents to put signs in the windows and expect for these businesses to come. And that's the same thing with putting it online, saying that it's for lease, it's for rent. That's not going to work anymore. We have to be very intentional, go into these communities, sit down, make a plan, figure out what companies, what stores, what retail establishments work best in this community, because the communities know best. They will be the ones that are patronizing these businesses. And then we need to call up these businesses. And that's something that I've already done. I won't disclose the hotel that's coming to downtown Atlanta, but that's what I did. When I understood that we need high quality jobs in our city that are paying living wages, I got on the phone and I called some of the people, some of the companies I did not even know. But what it resulted in was them coming to Atlanta, touring our great city and making a decision to move here.
Thank you, Mr. Sharp. Mr. Gray?
While heading supply diversity at Grady Health System, I moved the spend from 3% where I found it in 2013 to 33% by the end of my tenure there in 2017. What that spend went to, I'll break down the inequity in it. That went to majority African-American and women-owned firms here in the city of Atlanta because we trained them, we skilled them, and we got them qualified in healthcare construction, made sure they hired subcontractors in the city of Atlanta, and made sure they reached back to the youth. In Southwest Atlanta, we have a facility there today, Kaiser Permanente facility, that I've just signed contracts that are showing the subcontractors renovating that facility are of the community. But let me go deeper than that. We can't stop there. We also have a lot of contracts with other owners and entities and even within the city to where this level of impact is not happening. So what I will do day one is bring the experience of what my actual career has been for the last 20 years and making sure when we set a goal, we're not celebrating the pep rally. The Super Bowl is when our community wins. And I'll be there to validate it, not just write the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Mr. Goldberg?
Well, I mentioned earlier that with the rise in crime in Buckhead and Midtown, suddenly everyone's been paying attention. But this has been an issue in other parts of the city for a long time. And when areas are unsafe, it's hard to bring in businesses. It's hard to get people to move there. The group of us had an in-person forum just a couple days ago. Now, this was by the stadium. It wasn't too far southwest. But afterwards, someone said to me, "Oh boy, you parked by the stadium. How many times did your car get broken into?" Which is the default now for people. And when they have those perceptions, it's going to make it hard to establish economic security. Now, again, it needs to be effective but equitable policing, but we need to recognize the longstanding problem in these communities and work with the residents to make sure they feel safe and they can show that it's a safe area. We need to make sure that affordable housing, rezoning issues are dealt with in these areas as well, so that people aren't priced out of their homes. Gentrification, if we do nothing, is coming to these areas, and these people are going to get priced out of their homes, and we don't want that to be the reason that the economy picks up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brooks?
In order for us to bring in more businesses, we have to show people how to get it done. Right. So with my students, I always tell them, I don't pride myself on how many of you graduate at the top of the class, how many of you go to college and graduate at the top of that class. I tell them I value myself based on how many of you can buy a home within the next 4 years. And the way that they're able to buy those homes is by them being able to tap into their entrepreneurial spirit and the ability to create financial independence and freedom themselves. But you have to show them how, because you can't be what you don't see. So yes, many of our Black business entrepreneurs need entrepreneurship. They need someone to show them the ropes, but more importantly, they need access to capital. And there are many barriers that prevent, especially Black business owners and aspiring entrepreneurs, from accessing the capital to scale. This is why 96% of Black-owned businesses in the city of Atlanta have one employee, the owner. Only 4% actually hire other people.
I'm sorry, we're running out of time. I believe all questions have been answered.
I didn't get a chance to answer.
I'm waiting to find out if I should. Should we let Mr. Bond answer the question? Candace? Yes, yes. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. What we need to do is to continue to extend incentives for small businesses, but also work with the property owners specifically in Southwest Atlanta. I'll give you a prime example. People often say, why isn't the Westgate Shopping Center redeveloped? Why hasn't the city done anything about it? The reason why is because the property owner hasn't done anything about it. So we need to align our incentives to undergird small businesses, to give them the support that they need to launch. But we also need to get with the property owners in Southwest Atlanta along those commercial strips to make sure that they've got an incentive to lease and to help us to set up those small businesses in those communities. The economic data is there. It can support more businesses, but we need to make sure it's a partnership between the businesses, those who hold the real estate, and making sure that the community is aware of what we're doing. We did a smaller example of that at our MARTA state.
Thank you, Mr. Bond.
Thank you.
I'll turn it back over to you, Candace.
And I'm going to hand it over to our League Vice President, Nicola Hines, who is going to thank the candidates for participating in the forum tonight and offer any additional final thoughts.
Oh, Candace, they can do their closing statement.
I can let them do that. I was watching the time, so thank you very much.
Yes, let them do their closing statement and I'll do it.
All right, then. Well, so we've got a minute each for the candidates to have a closing statement. Since we went in alphabetical order to deliver opening statements, we will give you each 1 minute in reverse alphabetical order to deliver a closing statement. And Dream Sharp, you will begin.
So first, thank you for doing this. I think we do a lot of forums and a lot of surveys, and these are the times where we have this moment to really be able to talk about our platform and really introduce ourselves. And everyone is not giving us that opportunity. So first, thank you for that. Again, my name is Dream. My last name is Sharp. I'm running for Atlanta City Council, post 1 at large. If anything, remember about me is that I am here to do the work every single day. If you are looking for a city councilor that, again, not only is going to do the work, but also has the experience. We talk about being in a housing crisis. Well, I have experience with affordable housing, also development, also helping those that are homeless get into permanent housing. We talk about being in a transportation crisis or needing more alternative transportation. Not only do I use public transportation on a regular basis, but I've worked on transportation projects. So I have that experience. I have experience with many of the issues that we're facing in our city, and I'm ready and willing to provide solutions for them. So again, I'm running on a mission to make Atlanta the #1 city in America for everyone to live, work, play, and love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sharp. Mr. Gray.
Atlanta, this is not our first time meeting, and I want to thank the League of Women Voters for inviting us here today. At one point, I want to mention my family in the 1950s. My great aunt and uncle owned Lee's Inn, which stood on Ashby Street. It was one of the first places in the city where civil rights leaders could safely gather. I have built my entire career. My parents are 81 years young today, off of my family's legacy of fighting for diverse businesses, proven. Over $1 billion spent with minority and women-owned businesses at Grady. Over $2 billion spent under my leadership with Kaiser Permanente, proven. Over 15,000 jobs created through my leadership of minority business programs. I bring to the table experienced leadership, and I have been fighting for our community. I serve on the board of the Atlanta Business League. I serve on the board of directors for the Village at Carver YMCA. And your president, Nicola Hines, I was her vice chair on the City of Atlanta's Board of Ethics for 6 years. So you're electing a leader, if you elect me, that is experienced, I'm solution-driven, and I fought for diversity, equity, and inclusion before it became a buzzword. And I would do it for you each and every day. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Todd Gray. Brandon Corey Goldberg.
Every question tonight had the same assumption. This city is moving in the wrong direction. Candidates, what are you going to do to turn Atlanta around? Now, if you as an audience member think that all of those questions were faulty, that the premise was faulty, you can vote for the next 4 years to be exactly the same way that it is today. Go for it. But if you think that we need change, that we need to stop doing the same thing over and over and over again, my name is Brandon Corey Goldberg, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goldberg. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, a League of Women Voters. It's a pleasure to be with you. I am running to end the status quo of Atlanta's government doing too little for the most of us, while the whole of us only receive a little. Our campaign is not here to carry the bidding of corporate executives living in high rises, but for our unsheltered community, mothers who have lost their children to police brutality, women and families who don't know where the next meal is going to come from, and for every Atlantan woman that has been overlooked and unheard for the past 24 years. My name is Alfred Shivy Brooks, and I'm running because as an educator, I see too many families who don't have a place to call home, who don't have food on the tables, and who feel that their unstable income blocks them from being able to have the promise that they deserve. Much of this is due to the criminalization of race and poverty at the hands of out-of-touch politicians who choose their rise as an individual or as versus the collective and the rise of our people in our city. Our city does not need more walls for jails. We need more ladders for opportunity. Our city does not need more policies to increase negative engagement between the police and our neighbors. We need public safety that serves with civility and with compassion. We have an emergency for change. So I ask you to vote for me, Alfred Shivy Brooks for Atlanta City Council. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, sir. And Michael Julian Bond.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. Happy birthday to your parents, Mr. Gray and Mr. Brown. What hurts Black babies is when candidates campaign from their classroom instead of teaching their children that are in the classroom with them. No one from my campaign is affiliated with any construction of any kind of waste station in DeKalb County. They're lies, and I'm sorry that I had to use part of my closing statement to respond to that mess. I'm Michael Julian Bond. I am your post one at large candidate. I'm not new to this. I'm true to this. I've served you faithfully and thoughtfully and responsibly in my public service. I appreciate the privilege to represent you on the Atlanta City Council, and I want to do so again. I have passed more legislation than any person in the city's history, living or dead. I've worked in economic development from the past 30 years. I've responded to communities from Eastlake to Westlake, Buckhead to Bankhead, Prior Road to Piedmont, serving you on the Atlanta City Council. Please let me serve you again. Again, I'm Atlanta City Council member Michael Julian Bond, and I'm humbly asking for your vote and support. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bond. And now, Nicola, I will hand the program back over to you.
Thank you so much, Candace. I appreciate it. I wanted to make sure everyone got their closing statements. And so for those who are running a little late, but I appreciate it. So good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending our post one at large City of Atlanta Council position. I am Nicola Hines, and I am the president of the League of Women Voters, Atlanta Fulton County. Thank you, Ms. Presley, for being our moderator tonight. As always, did a lovely job. And thank you to our candidates, Councilman Bond, Mr. Brooks, Mr. Goldberg, Mr. Gray, and Mr. Sharp, for taking the time out to educate, empower, and engage our residents of City of Atlanta. Thank you to our Voter Services Committee for all the hard work and dedication to the League. And thank you all the residents and all the participants who listened on both via Facebook and via our Zoom link. So before we get a little bit further, we are definitely doing a lot of candidate forums, and it's very important that we get the word out to everybody in the city of Atlanta. One of the things I'm stressing to everyone is that the face of city politics can easily change, as there are only 3 uncontested seats for this election cycle. So for all those, it is important to get your voice out, to hear your candidates in a normal, moderated conversation. When I said we're doing a marathon, I'm just going to break it down. This is my job as president to let everybody who knows what's going on. So later on tonight, we're actually doing District 4 candidate forum. September 4th, we are doing District 6, 24th, sorry, that's tomorrow, District 6 at 8 p.m. September 30th, we are doing District 1 and District 12. On October 1st, we are doing District 3 and District 9. On October 2nd, we are doing District 5 at 3 p.m. October 5th, we are hosting with our partners, Emory University, ACLU, Urban League of Greater Atlanta, and trying to think if there's somebody else. Sorry, that's it. We are hosting our mayoral candidate forum at Emory University on October 5th. That will be a hybrid event, so we will be in person and streaming live. On October 12th, we are also doing City Council President Candidate Forum, and that will also be hybrid. And that is with our partners. We have Delta Sigma Theta, we have Lynx, we have ACLU and Urban League also being our partners for that. And then we'll end with October 14th with District 10 and District 11. As I stated, every seat except for 3 are uncontested at this moment. So hopefully you can join us, spread the word. If you know candidate residents that are in those districts or want to hear from your next city president or mayor. Once again, thank you for attending tonight. And if you would like more information, once again, I would not be president if I did not say join the League of Women Voters, Atlanta Fulton County. And you can go to our website at lwvaf.org/join. The League is proud to be a nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government, but always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public that accepts members from all sides of the aisle: race, gender, religion, and sex. So we are a great organization. We're 101 years old, one of the oldest civic engaging organizations in the country. So thank you everyone again. Have a great night, and candidates, best of luck.